Hello, my name is Carol Mae Whittick, and welcome to Her Conversations, Tools for the Awakening Woman. HER is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. This is the optimal state to embody in order to attract our highest desires. Who is the awakening woman? She is the woman who's seeking a greater possibility in her reality and looking for solutions. She knows being awakened is not a lofty ideal, but a necessity. If she can transform herself, she can change the world. Her conversations will introduce you to talented women who will speak to your spirituality, sensuality, and soul. They share their stories and explain how they are in service to the world. So let their words in these conversations embolden and inspire you. On this week's Her Conversations, it's just me, Carol Mae Whittick, talking to you, the listener. And in a way, I've been prompted by circumstance. Part of me wanted to do something like this. And also in taking my time to get to it and speaking to some other friends, I've found that this is something that more than one person wants to hear. So if you've been following me on Instagram, or if you've heard some of my other episodes, you'll know that I have moved to Bali just for a little while, just for a few weeks, to take some time out. And the conversation, or the title of this conversation, even though it's me, myself and I've decided to call Release, Revelation and Race. So yeah, it's not going to be the lightest of subjects the week before Christmas or a few days before Christmas, but such is the way that things happen in life. They don't always fit into the calendar and the mood that we're supposed to be feeling at a certain time of the year. 2018 has been a major year for me in all ways, shapes and forms. From the beginning, it was a lot of moving around. I was in London. I was just not settled, living in the way that I've been living in terms of location-wise and in the situation, and also in the work that I was doing. I was balancing freelance work with work that I was doing online, which is kind of websites and graphic design and that kind of thing. And I was kind of stepping into both, or stepping slowly out of one into the other as I started to become more confident in the skills. So one of the big lessons, if I'm kind of going by my own titles, has been the release. And the release this year has been the release of things that just don't fit anymore. If I want to do all the things that I feel that I want to do, if I want to make an impact on the world in the way that I feel that I want to make an impact, I can't make change by holding on to things that are not, for want of a more underused phrase, serving me anymore. And they just weren't. They just were not. If I think about those situations, there were situations that I was hiding in. There were situations where I was not seen. There were situations where I was not supported. And anytime I spoke about the things that I was doing or the goals that I had for myself, it wasn't even so much as it being it was just not understood. It flew around and above most of the people that I was speaking to. And again, I realised, looking at that, that's just another way of hiding, basically. You're putting yourself in a place where no one can find you. And up until a certain point, there's a safety in that, because there's going to be a reason why I would create that container for myself. And I'm still digging into the ideas and the reasons why I would do that. And I can sort of kind of understand why I did it. But, I've got the rest of my life to kind of work that one out. Hopefully it won't take me all of that time. But yes, release was definitely about releasing things that were not serving me anymore, and also certain ideas that I had about myself. release was not only letting go, but release was actually opening up to part of me that was just being very frustrated by not being seen within myself, getting just an internal frustration of, why do you keep putting yourself in these situations? Support came from many groups, and I was starting to then be recognised and spoken to on a level by people who I actually respected. And when I looked at the people who were disrespecting me, I didn't hold them in any great regard, in terms of they weren't living the lives that I wanted to live. There was nothing about them that I felt inspired by. Nice enough people, but, it wasn't doing anything for me. So I had to step away from that. And it happened time and time again, because I was just trying to make lily pad steps from one thing to another. And the way that fate would have it, it just came and it just pulled the tablecloth off and everything fell on the floor, and I had to pick the pieces up and decide what I was going to do. And this just seemed like an idea. It seemed, if I just get away from everything that's distracting me, if I get away from the things that I'm being mirrored by or the expectations that I'm walking into, then I'm going to have to really take a cold, hard look at who I am and what I'm doing, and I can reinvent myself in a way, but then I'm not really reinventing myself. All I'm doing is allowing myself to be who I want to be without having to explain the changes that I'm making, the changes that I'm trying to make on a super swift level. So those were some of the releases. Revelation just came to me listening more to myself, hearing the ideas that were burgeoning, and also revelation about how much I knew already. It was something that I did a lot of second guessing when I wasn't met with complete or immediate approval. It was like, oh, well, maybe that's not such a great idea. And that in itself was a revelation. Another revelation that came to me was, or it just actually flourished in a greater way and got me started, was what I wanted to do with her as a brand, as a platform, that higher energetic resonance. I knew that I wanted to do more with it than just it being a podcast, and I love doing the podcast, but I feel that I need to make something more of it. And that's where the idea for Her Life Academy came. So Her Life Academy is something that I'm starting to build, and I'm put a date in the diary for February 2019 when it's going to launch, and it's going to be an online membership platform for the awakening woman. So as with Her Conversation, which is tools for the awakening woman, Her Life Academy is a monthly platform of instruction and inspiration for awakening women. And all of these things were able to kind of come with more clarity and more definite, just a more solid and definite idea than I would have had I have been kind of dealing with the running around and scrabbling that I felt my life had got to at the point before. So it's still going to sit with Her Conversations, in that there's still going to be parts about it dealing with spirituality, dealing with sensuality, dealing with soul. So spirituality is the part where we're looking at having or creating or acknowledging in the first instance the link with the greater part of ourselves. And the way that I intend to start to build on that is by providing a monthly downloadable MP3 meditation, a guided meditation that will work on that as well. So it's about feeling your power, knowing that you're part of a creative force and being able to tune into the source of that, and then as a result becoming unstoppable in whatever it is that you want to create. Sensuality is about treating yourself and how you treat your body, how you treat yourself in the physical. It's to do with self-love. It's to do with transforming your health, your wealth, your relationships, and everything that is related to being a human being, just on a day-to-day basis, even down to the way that you present yourself, the way that you dress. All of these things are important. And then the soul aspect is going to be about your mission on earth. So your soul is whether you choose to raise a family, you can do that in a meaningful and soulful way. And everyone can kind of hark back to times in their life where maybe they felt that that wasn't done to them. So it's trying to create that and create tools and wisdom for the women who come within her Life Academy to be able to create that within their lives. Or it may be for others, it might be creating some sort of community aspect, it might be creating a business. So then it will also provide information and tools to do with that. One of my great passions is working online and the internet and technology and all of that. So it's getting people to, or bringing people on who have expertise with that, and also the tools that I've learned on my journey to becoming her, which is where all of this sprang from as well. So it's also looking at the part of your the parts of us where we can kind of hold our hand up and go, well, I've got a story about this happened to me and this is why. And just flipping that on its head and seeing the purpose and the reason why these things happened and why we can actually make something out of that. So my revelation has been, this is the way that I want it to go. My revelation has been how when I can just drill down and focus how much I get done. The revelation is I'm always being guided, I'm always being protected. And maybe there's been times when I've not felt that, and just being here and being focused, not knowing too many people around here and not really delving into the touristic part of Bali, but just being in a space that just feels very, very different from London, and allowing that to happen. And then the final part of the title is race. And like I said, it seems like a big subject to handle just before Christmas, but hey, this is the way that it is. And the race piece came to me into my life. Not that I've been unaware of the colour of my skin or who I am. A week ago, like I said, I'm in Bali, and one of the ways that I earn is I help people with online, anything to do with online. So building websites, doing graphics, email newsletters, that kind of thing. I will help kind of bring that all together for them as well. So a friend of mine who had asked me after we had a lunch or so if I did anything to websites, and she kind of knew, had put me in contact with a colleague, a friend of hers, I don't know how close they are, and we made an arrangement to have a meeting. And she'd sent me an email. Stating that she needed quite a lot of work done online. So there were a couple of websites that she needed some help with. One of them was on a platform that I don't use, and I did say to her, I don't use that platform, I can tweak, but it's WordPress. I'm not the biggest WordPress expert. However, I know how to kind of just smooth things out if the case may be. But she wanted quite a little bit of work done, and she was actually quite keen to meet me on the morning that she had sent the email. But as it transpired, we just never put it together in time, and it didn't happen then. So we made an arrangement to meet the next morning. And in the morning, we were messaging each other, and we made an arrangement to meet at a coffee shop just more in Ubud town. So I strolled up there, and kind of when I left out, I thought, I wonder if I know, I'm thinking, I don't know what she looks like. And then I'm thinking, well, maybe she doesn't know what I look like. But then I assumed that my friend would have sent her to the websites where I list all the services that I do. And there's a great big picture of me as well. So I just assumed, well, okay, maybe I'm just overreacting the whole thing, but I'll get there and I'll work out who she is. She'll be more than likely sitting on her own. So I got to the coffee shop and I kind of walked around, and it's just after breakfast, so it's still quite busy. And most of the tables have groups of people on, and there's a couple of tables at the front of the store, and there's the main cafe area, and then there's also tables out the back. So I'm walking up and down, I go right out to the back. I don't see anyone who looks like they're on their own. I come back inside, and then I see there's a lady sitting on her own. I go up to her and say, "Hi, I'm Carol. Are you?" And she's like, "No." I'm like, "Okay, that's not the person." Then at the time, I'm trying to work out whether I should get a drink or whether I should, I'm trying to get on their Wi-Fi so I can send her a message. And then I turn and I look outside and I can see there's 2 tables outside and there's a lady that's sitting on her own. So I go outside and I put my hand out, introduce myself and say, "Hi, I'm Carol. Are you?" And she said yes. So this is when things start to take an interesting turn, because it was before we left from the outside part to go back into the shop to then find somewhere to sit down and begin this meeting. Within those first couple of minutes, she had said to me, "I was expecting a blonde lady," or "I was expecting you to have blonde hair." I can't remember the exact thing, but blonde was mentioned. Now, there's no part of me that's blonde, and I didn't realise how much of an effect it had on me immediately, because my first instinct was, well, no, I've never really had blonde hair, and kind of laughed it off. And then we continued and walked into the shop, and we're kind of the cafe, and we're looking for somewhere to sit down where we can kind of get our laptops up and link to the whole thing. Now, in hindsight, which is perfect vision, the brains in me would have said, "Is that a problem?" Because that statement just indicated to me that she just had in mind that she was meeting a white woman, and the fact that she meant me was a total shock to her. Guess who's coming to dinner? And as we're kind of walking around trying to find somewhere to sit down and everything like that, it's just reverberating in my mind now. It's just like, she didn't say that, did she? She did. Who says that? This kind of conversation, this is the conversation that's kind of happening in my head now as well, but she didn't make a thing of it as, "I'm going to get up and go away because you're not a blonde lady." It was just, it continued that we're going to sit down and we're going to continue talking about what we're going to talk about. But that comment, to my surprise, put me off centre for that entire meeting. And it was by no means a short meeting. It was probably a couple of hours. If I think, I got there at 10:30, and by the time I got to the place that I wanted to have lunch, and I had lunch on my own, I really feel it was like pushing kind of 1:00. So there was like a good 2-hour stretch in that time of us talking. And during the course of our conversation, it just became, and this could just be my perception, but I found that, like I said, I was off centre. I felt, and I saw myself kind of trying to overprove what I was doing, because I was not a blonde woman. And this is me now speaking almost a week later. And I've had opportunities to speak to other people about it. And what surprised me is how much it brought up. And it didn't all feel like mine. The outcome of the meeting was that when we'd walked away from each other, it was agreed that I was going to do some work for her, because she hadn't looked at my website, she didn't see my rates. So then that came as another surprise as well. So we had another conversation, and we negotiated a rate. I'm cutting a lot out, because I could go into it, and there were, and now I'm making excuses, but it could be that maybe I was hypersensitive to things that were being said, but then things get said all the time when I'm showing people the work that I do. It looks very easy, but I make it look easy. I've been doing it for 4 years. So we came to an agreement on the price, and I left, and like I said, I walked away to the place that I wanted to have lunch. And that was like a 10, 15-minute walk maximum, probably not even that. And even when I got there, as I was walking down the street and just kind of working out the whole thing that had happened in my mind, I didn't feel good. I didn't feel good about what had happened. I didn't feel good in my body at all. It was just a feeling of maybe I'll do this work because I've said I'll do this work, and also, you know, it's a finance thing as well. I need to keep working. So when I got to the restaurant, I sat down and I Marco Polo'd a couple of friends, and I actually mentioned it just really briefly because it was almost like I was still in shock a little bit about what had happened. And then I was on my phone, and then I saw that an email came in from her within the hour of us meeting, just retracting the whole offer of work, basically. She didn't want to work with me. She didn't feel comfortable about certain things, and respected my skills level, and I deserved to get X amount of money, or the money that I asked for, and she couldn't meet that, and Om Shanti. I tell you no lies. So that was the way that ended. And it's been years since I've had a direct. It's been many years. The last time that I can think that I had a direct situation where my colour was alluded to, and it was when I was at school. When I was just thinking over doing this podcast, I was trying to remember a situation where something like that had happened. I'm sure it's happened, you know, many times since, but this is one that actually made an effect on a result that I was going to have in my life. And this was when I was at school, and I was 16. And in my school that I went to, we call it senior school in the UK, this was just me preparing for our GCSEs. So these are the exams that you take before you take 2 years of A-levels that then decide what you're going to do as a degree in university or not, as the case may be. And I was in a school where my year was the first year that they'd let in. There were more black children and children of colour, Asian, black, in my year alone than they were in the 6 years above us. There was like 4 more senior years and then 2 more sixth form years. And in our year, obviously they'd changed the policy for one reason or another. There were more faces of colour than there was in the entire school. So, and as we progressed through the years, over the years, then that became the norm. They had a higher quotient of children of colour. So just thinking about my schooling, and this is relevant, the kids that I hung around with mostly on my breaks, the majority of my friends were people of colour. They were mixed, but I had a higher quotient of black girlfriends, Asian girlfriends, even though there weren't so many Asians in that school. And then the bands of classes that I was with, in terms of like skill level, I usually was the only black face in that class. And the incident happened in one of my maths classes, and I was in the highest band. And the students within that highest band had a completely different, they would take a different exam from the rest of the class, the rest of the school, the rest of the students that were doing maths. And it would mean that they would be eligible to get a grade from C all the way up to A star. And that was great. I found maths easy. I didn't really have to try at school. If it was interesting, I got it. If it wasn't, then, I just kind of got through it somehow. And one day, the maths teacher actually made a quote-unquote joke about, we were doing something about percentages or earnings or something to do with calculating life. And there was one number that he said, well, this is the average earning of a black person, this is the average earning of a white person. The earnings that he attributed to a black person were considerably lower than the other. And what happened in that class is instantly, everyone in the room, all of my classmates, some of them my friends, laughed, stopped, turned around and looked at me and realised that, oh my God, Carol's black, that's not funny, and we've just laughed. I didn't tell anyone about it apart from my friends, which is not really the way to deal with anything in school. And subsequently, because then I just kind of went into his class, I didn't make a fuss of it. I just sat there and I was kind of on strike. They moved me to the lower set because they realised that I wasn't going to get anything out of it. So as a result, I only got a C in my maths grade because I got moved out of that because of what the teacher said. And I think he apologised to me. I can't remember. But it was just interesting that situation that was to an extent a mass humiliation when you've got everyone that just laughs at a situation and their expectation, and they turned around and realised, oh my God, but it's Carol, but she's black, and trying to put all the bits together. So part of this situation here was having someone being surprised that she wanted such specialised technical work done, and it couldn't even be conceivable to her that she would meet a person of colour. There was that. And then also the fact that she brought it up and said it to my face. Now, I don't know whether she realised what she said, because I didn't actually call her out on it. I didn't say anything about it. I let it kind of hang in the air, and it hung. There was just this kind of awkwardness in me that I don't recognise in myself, especially when I'm talking about technical stuff and online stuff, because I love it. I know what I'm talking about, and I was just fumbling, and the Wi-Fi wasn't connecting. I was making excuses for all of this when none of it was my fault. I was just shook. And it just seems to relate also to the conversation that I notice online with women of colour speaking to white women in particular in the spirituality sector. It's very difficult, I'm going to assume, when you're in a position of privilege, when everything is laid out in order to make your life easy. So you won't even realise the potential roadblocks, the potential obstacles, because you would rarely encounter them. Life is set up for that not to be the case with you. The best analogy I've heard of that is, if you're a left-handed person, the world is set up for right-handed people. So you have to adapt, even though you're kind of going against your natural grain. You have to adapt. And I was, again, like I'm saying, surprised at how deeply this had affected me. How then I felt like I didn't have the words to, or the quick wit to even stand up for myself in the moment, and then walk away and feel very, one, ashamed that I didn't handle it better. And also shocked and, to a degree, hurt by the situation, but frustrated again that I didn't have any way of going, hang on, you know what you said about the thing? What did you mean by that? I wasn't able to do that. And then also to add to the fact that, you know, that it was all under the pretense of Om Shanti and, you know, love and light and peace and love and all of this kind of thing, just made it even more, I want to say, disgusting. And, you know, we've all got our biases. As open as we want to be, we've been led down so many different routes to believe certain things about certain people that we make a judgment. The minute that we see someone or something in front of us, we've got all these assumptions, and it's just, how do we work out unpicking them? How do we also recognize when we're coming into a situation and just bring in all of our prejudice, all of our bias, all of our stinking behaviour to it, not realising that we might be disrespecting someone, we are disrespecting someone, but also we're highlighting in ourselves something that is guiding our life in such a narrow way that would never know the breadth of how life can be, how other people live, or an understanding of what people have been through. It's when I see the conversation that happens online between women of colour and white women in the spirituality sector in particular, because that's where most of my attention is. At times, hands up, I feel very ill-informed about it. And this is not to say that I am not aware that I'm a black woman. It's like, I can't deny that. But I've not read half of the books. I don't have half of the references. I don't know, is this because I was brought up in the UK, that these things were not as prevalent, maybe, if that's the right word. But also thinking back to my own childhood, there were other things going on. There were other real pressing, constant issues going on that, whether this makes sense or not, being black was the least of my problems. I had to deal with surviving and keeping my head straight in a situation that was not stable for pretty much all of my childhood. So being aware that, yes, you know, I'm a minority, I was aware of that. I was aware of it also when I went to church. I was brought up in a Pentecostal church. My father was a pastor. He passed away when I was very young. And over the intervening years, my mum lost faith in that church and moved us to a Church of England church, which is mainly a white attended church. So I was used to being a minority in the church where we went to worship. And then when I developed a real interest in yoga and Pilates and that kind of work outside of just going to the gym, then also I got used. I was just usually the only black person in the studio. And I kind of got used to it, kind of expected it really, because I knew very few women of colour teachers. I didn't actively seek them out either. I just didn't see them represented. The last place that I went to that was a studio over a couple of years ago, had maybe one or two, and I think I got to go to one class because mostly they just didn't tie in with the time that I wanted to go. And I always wanted, every time that I was doing my yoga classes, I always dreamed of having just more of my family there, because I could feel the difference that it was making for me. And I just felt it could help them, but they just weren't open to the yoga, the meditation, that kind of thing. And talking about hiding again, after a while, I just stopped even bringing it up as a conversation. It'd be, I'd mention it, but I'd just kind of let it go. So I knew that it was a very lone path that I was going, and it didn't bother me to an extent that I was the only black woman in the room, because I wanted the information. I wanted to learn what was happening. And my view on it was, okay, there's no one else here, then maybe I'll just be the first, and then I'll kind of bring everyone will follow behind me, in much the same way that the pattern developed when I went to my senior school, that my year was the first year where there was more children of colour, and then the years after it would just became the norm to have more children of colour. I'm trying to think of the things that I want to say here. I think what I'd like to happen, now that I've brought this to her conversations, is for there to be more conversation on both sides. It's not something that I've ever had a deep conversation with any of my white friends during any point in my life. But for the women, the white women who listen to this podcast, if you're still with me, if you know any women of colour, have a conversation with them maybe. Ask them how life has been for them. Like I said, I've not faced like out and out racism, but then again, maybe I'm just not aware of it. I've been the left-handed person in the right-handed world. And it's only when I come up against a real blatant display of, I wouldn't say disappointment in who I am, or the fact that it didn't make sense for me to be able to do what I wanted to do. So I met up with somebody's bias without them knowing anything about me. And then it being later backpedaled by kind of praising me and going, I don't want to pay you what you're worth because you're worth so much more, and trying to turn it into some kind of reverse compliment. I've got a lot to learn. Because I'm now more and more understanding the disadvantage I've been at. And I just, up until this point, kind of ho-hummed my way through it. It's like, well, I'm a black girl, this is it, But you forget sometimes, because you're just used to swimming against the tide so much that you don't even realise that you're doing it. It brings up a lot of things because it makes me think about the matriarchal figures in my family, and gives me, and it extends to them some more compassion, to maybe understanding why they're feeling how they're feeling about life now. And by that I'm saying I see in them a real weariness because they've spent their entire lives fighting. And a lot of the time, maybe even fighting against a tide that they didn't even realise they were going against. And then they've got to a certain point in their life where they've just sat down and just allowed the weariness to envelop them. And I know I've always wanted to do something different from everything that I've seen in my direct environment. And it's been commendable, but it's been hard, because a lot of what I learnt about how the world is and how to survive it is still tripping me up to this day. And those are the things that I want to work on. So this has been my conversation, just me talking into my headset in a room in Bali, thinking about what has happened, trying to make sense of it, trying to understand my own reactions, which a week later, now that I'm kind of out of my feelings, I can maybe make sense of, but I don't know what I've said in these past few minutes, however long I've been recording. But I just wanted to voice it. It was knowing that I created this platform. It was only going to be a matter of time before I had to address this in a greater way. And I've done it a couple of times before, but I need to educate myself a little bit more. This is what I'm feeling. I need to educate myself a little bit more. Maybe I don't fully understand the struggle. Maybe I'm so idealistic that I think we can transcend this without digging into the struggle or addressing the struggle or confronting somebody on their privilege. I don't know. And it's made me assess deeply. And I've had to sit and contemplate it. I've dealt with anger and shame about this. These are real things. I've cried about this in the past week as well, because I felt that I was naive. And I just felt sad about that. And this all just came from one comment. One comment that somebody probably didn't even realise they made. But then, when you're a grown person, it's hard not to realise the shit that comes out of your mouth sometimes. Thank you for listening to me on this solo episode. I really appreciate it. I'd like for it to open up a greater conversation. I think it's obvious that this needs to happen, especially when we're trying to pull each other forward, when we're trying to congregate and rise the feminine and rise in womanhood. But if we're still fighting amongst each other, it's not going to happen. There has been, and we can't not admit it, there has been a great advantage afforded to the white woman. But the black woman in her struggle has developed such strength and such tenacity and such grace that these things can't be ignored. So if you imagine, if you combine the open road of privilege and then allow someone who's been jumping around and pushing against something for so long the opportunity to flourish without feeling that they have to temper themselves or be afraid or ashamed or upset. So I'd really like to hear from anyone who would like to add more to this conversation. You can find me on my website. My website is carolmaewhittick.com, and that's carolmaewhittick.com. And I'm on Facebook under my name, carolmaewhittick.com, and also on Twitter. Actually, do you know what? I don't use Twitter very much, so don't go there. I'm on Instagram, Kazmick, which is CAZMICK. So this is leading up to Christmas. I want to wish you happy holidays, and I may take a break next week, and I'll be back in the new year. So thanks for listening.